Okay, so in the beginning we saw that this chapter starts with, you can say, the First World War, the beginning of First World War, and the emergence of Gandhi in India, and then we saw that how First World War, Khilafat, and non-cooperation movement started, right? On the issue of Ottoman Empire and cooperating with the British government and not all these things, and we saw that how it unfolded, and we saw that how what was the meaning of NCM for the various sections of society, and we knew what Rowlatt Act was, all these things, right? Why people were angry, all those things we knew. Okay, that was the one. Then we saw that, okay, at let's say at page number 33 or 34, that what was the meaning of NCM for different kind of people, let's say countryside people, the tribals, then plantation, and the people, and the city people, and all these things, right? But eventually we saw that the movement failed, or you can say movement, Gandhi suspended the movement, right? And after that CDM started. All right, so page number 38 talks about the background of CDM, where you saw that because of the gap of 10 around 10 years or something, Congress was also restless, and you can say that there was a need to start a new movement that was called CDM. And we saw the background of CDM, that means Simon Commission was one of them, right? And all these things. Okay, so that took place. Now it's we saw in this also that what was the meaning of CDM for the various sections of society, and how people, who were the people who supported the CDM, and who were the people who did not support the CDM, right? All those things we saw that, right? Now we are talking about at page number 43, we are talking about the limits of civil disobedience movement, right? Yeah, here we have to start. So that is page number 43. The topic is topic number 3.3, the limits of CDM. So as we have already seen that not everybody supported the CDM, right? You can see that the industrialist, or you can say the capitalist people were there in the Congress. That is why the workers kept themselves isolated from CDM. That means this time they did not support the CDM, right? So what were the limitations of CDM? So it said not all social groups were moved by the abstract concept of Swaraj. One such group was the nation's untouchable. That means that the untouchables were not, you can say, addressed in this entire movement, who from around the 1930 had begun to call themselves Dalit or oppressed. For long, the Congress had ignored the Dalits. Now, see, that time also the caste feeling was there, and because of that, what happened? That many people did not want to work with the untouchables, or you can say the low caste people, because they thought that in the freedom movement we cannot work with them, because since centuries, or you can say millenniums, we have kept them sidelined, so we cannot work with them. So that was the anti low caste feeling going on in their minds. So it says, for the fear of offending the Sanatanis, the conservative high caste Hindus. So who were the Sanatanis? Sanatanis were the conservative high caste Hindus. They were called Sanatanis. But Mahatma Gandhi declared that Swaraj would not come for 100 years if untouchability was not eliminated. He called the untouchables Harijan. So remember this name, that who called untouchables the Harijan? Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, what name Mahatma Gandhi gave to the untouchables? Harijan. Harijan, Hari means God, or Jan means people, okay, or man. So they are created by God, right? Okay, so the God's creation, that is why it is called Harijan. Okay, so untouchables were called Harijan. That means ki these people are also made by Bhagwan, or you can say God. So you can't say that the way you are made by Bhagwan or something. So similarly, these people also are made by God. So you can't say that I will not touch him, or they should not touch me, and this kind of social discrimination, or you can say social differences. If it is there, we will never achieve independence. This is what Gandhi said. All right. So they are the children of God. Okay, organize satyagrah to secure them entry into temples and access to public wells, tanks, roads, and schools. I told you one that when I read the autobiography of Gandhi, Gandhi himself had written that when he reached Mahatma Gandhi Rajendra Prasad house, he made to sit on the floor, squatting on the floor for many hours. Why? Until Rajendra Prasad reached home. Why? Because this caste feeling was there already. Okay, and people that time openly used to ask that what caste you belong to. Right now we have agitation. Okay, but that time people openly I used to ask. This is how you will be treated. If you are from the high caste, you will be treated in a different way. If you are low caste, you will be treated in a different way, right? Okay, so opposing this, Gandhi organized temple entry, then access to public wells, tanks, roads and school. And you see, still temple entry, see the continuity and changes. Of course a lot of changes have come in our society, but still temple entry is still a big problem in South India. Okay, ladies are not allowed to enter in certain temples. Similarly, the untouchables, or you can say the low caste people, are also not allowed to enter in some temples. So if this, see, you can see, we live in a united country. Okay, we are living in 21st century, but still these kind of, dogmatism, or you can say these kind of things are still there. Okay, so he himself cleaned toilets to dignify the work of Bhangi. Who are the Bhangi? The sweepers. Okay, so Gandhi himself cleaned the toilet. That though I am very literate, I am a foreign returned person. Okay, I have a very broad mindset. Then also, and I don't feel something low in cleaning the toilets and all these things. So this is how he tried to dignify the work of the sweepers, and persuaded upper caste to change their heart and give up the sin of untouchability. Okay, this is what he said, that you should not have this kind of feeling. But many Dalit leaders were keen on a different political solution to the problem of community. So this problem, but many people wanted, the Dalit leaders wanted that no, we have to have a different kind of solution, right? We don't know, these upper class people, maybe in the persuasion of Gandhi, they may accept us, but this is not going to change anything. Why? Until and unless you have political power in your hand. Okay, see, the constitution today says what? That everybody is equal, right? Okay, and this is how we are empowering these untouchables, or you can say these low caste people, that everybody is equal, no discrimination on the basis of caste, creed and all these things, right? So they wanted, the Dalit leaders wanted that we need a constitutional solution. Okay, or you can say the legal framework there should be there. So they began organizing themselves, demanding reserved seats in educational institutions and separate electorate. That means in our area only, where the Dalits live, only the Dalit candidate should stand election or contest election, and that would choose Dalit members for legislative council. So separate electorate should be there. That means in Dalit area only Dalit members should contest election, number one, right? And we need reservation in educational institutions so that our children can also study. Otherwise they will never be allowed to enter in any educational institution such as school and college. So that's not good. Political empowerment, this is what I told you, that until unless constitutionally or politically they have been empowered, they could not believe that these upper caste people, that today their mindset will change and they will never, right? So we need a weapon. And what is the weapon? Political empowerment, constitutional weapon. So they believed that would resolve the problems of their social disabilities. And this was correct also, that why to discriminate people. Okay, let's say we have for centuries, not I will say for the millenniums, we have been discriminating now, but what is the solution? And you can see, understand, and the leaders also understood that something which has been going on for, let's say, 200 years, 2000 years, okay, it cannot be completely changed when Gandhi says, because our deep rooted social customs and the tradition will never change, right? So in that case, if we want to uplift the condition of these untouchables or the Dalits, we need to have constitutional and political tools. Okay, so that is why they started demanding separate electorate and educational reservation in educational institutions. Reservation in educational institution is fine, but separate electorate was not fine. I tell you why. This is how the Indian society will be further divided. Gandhi wanted to unite the Hindus and the Muslims, right? With the demand of the separate electorate, what will happen? That Hindus will be divided into lower caste and upper caste. So the society will be further fragmented, and that's not good. That's not good. Okay, this is so Gandhi opposed this. He opposed that no, separate electorate will give a chance to the Britishers to rule us in a different way, because since the beginning, since 1757, they have been dividing the country on various issues, and the divide and rule policies they are pursuing. So this separate electorate will further give them a chance, right, to divide us. So this should not be done. All right. So Dalit participation in the CDM movement was therefore limited, particularly in Maharashtra and Nagpur region, where their organizations was quite strong. So Ambedkar was one of them. So here it says Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who organized the Dalits into the Depressed Class Association. Remember this name, depressed. See, because it's capital letter written. Okay. So Depressed Class Association. In 1930, he formed the Depressed Class Association. Okay, clashed with Mahatma Gandhi at the second RTC by demanding separate electorate for the Dalits. So when Gandhi reached London, I told you in the last class, the second RTC, he round table conference, he participated in that, right? Ambedkar was also there. So when discussion was going on, Ambedkar demanded that we need separate electorate. That means we need separate areas for the Dalits, and for there only the Dalit candidate will only contest election. So this was strongly opposed by Gandhi, right? And that was also one of the reasons for the failure of second RTC. So when British government conceded Ambedkar's demand, Gandhi began a fast unto death. So what happened, that when Britishers wanted what? Britishers wanted that the Indian society should be fragmented in many ways, so that they should easily rule, right? So naturally, when Ambedkar said that we want separate electorate, immediately, happily, the British government agreed that okay, we will give you, right? Gandhi knew that what their trick is, right? So that is why Gandhi threatened, and Gandhi began a fast unto death, right? He believed that a separate electorate for Dalits would slow down the process of their integration in the society, because see, they will say that they will say that the Dalit will say that we live in a separate area, so I don't care what the upper caste think and all. So this is how they cannot be integrated in the society. So we need to mix. We need to create a situation or circumstances where both the upper caste and the lower caste people can sit together, work together, talk together, and all these things, right? So keeping them in a separate area is not going to solve the problem. So Ambedkar ultimately accepted Gandhi's position, and the result was Pune Pact of 1932. Remember this line, Pune Pact of September 1932. So question may come that Pune Pact was signed between whom? Okay, which two leaders? So Gandhi and Ambedkar. What was the outcomes of Pune Pact? What was the provisions of Pune Pact? So Pune Pact was between Gandhi and Ambedkar on this issue only, right? So you now know the background. You know the background, that in second RTC, when Ambedkar demanded separate electorate, right, Gandhi opposed, and when Britishers accepted the demand, Gandhi began fast unto death. Eventually, they agreed upon Pune Pact, okay, and that gave what? It gave the depressed class. It gave the depressed class reserved seats in provincial and central legislative councils. That means in provincial and central legislative council they will have reserved seats. That this much seat is reserved for them, right? So this is how they can secure their representation in the legislative councils and assemblies. Further, but they were to be voted in by the general electorate. The seats will be reserved, but when voting time will come, they will be considered general people. That means with us only. It is not that they are a separate class, so they will vote separately. They have to be with us so that integration can take place, and this is how we can feel stronger in the house. Otherwise, if the house itself is, when I'm talking about house, I'm talking about legislative council and assemblies. Okay. So when in the house also, if we are fragmented, that the Muslims are voting in favor of the Britishers, the Dalits are also voting in favor of the Britishers, then the Congress will never win. Okay, and this is the way we cannot achieve our goals. So we have to be together. I understand that Muslim League is a separate party and we cannot win them over, but of course the Dalits are our part, they are the Hindus, right? Okay, so if the house is divided in on the basis of religion, that Hindus versus Muslims, at least they should support us, the Dalits, right? That is why he said that reservation will be there, fine, but when voting comes, they have to be part of us. So Dalit movement, however, continued to be apprehensive of the Congress-led national movement. Then also the Dalit always thought that I don't think they will accept us or something, because in Congress most of the leaders were very hi-fi, or you can say very rich, very of mostly of the upper class, right? So in that case, those upper class people will never accept us, number one. And these upper class landlords who are the members of Congress and the leaders of Congress, how they behave with the lower class people or the untouchables in their villages, it was known to everybody, right? So of course the Dalit people were a little apprehensive, they had reservations ki they will not treat us well. Anyway, some of the Muslim political organizations in India were also lukewarm in the response of the CDM. After the decline of non-cooperation Khilafat movement, a large section of Muslims felt alienated from the Congress. From the mid 1920s, the Congress came to be more visibly associated with openly Hindu religious nationalist group like Hindu Mahasabha. Okay, so now you can say on the lines of Muslim League. See, when we say Congress, we don't, that does not represent any religious body. But when you say Muslim League, that means this is a political party which belongs to the Muslim. Okay, so on response to that, Hindu Mahasabha was also formed, right? That means this party is for Hindu Mahasabha. And Congress had both the leaders. You can see in the picture also, Gandhi is there. Okay, Gandhi is there, Jawaharlal Nehru is there, and who is this? You know who is this? Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Okay, Maulana Azad is here. So Kalam Azad was he was also. So you can see the Congress is the combination of both the Muslims and the Hindus. Even do you know the founder of Pakistan? Girls. Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was also a leader of Congress. Okay, Congress was such a big party and it had so many Muslim members that even Jinnah was the member of Congress. Okay, but later when he saw that these Hindus will always be in majority, right, and we Muslims will always be in minority, so what he did, that he joined Muslim League so that he can be adamant on the formation of Pakistan. Otherwise, what I wanted to say, that's a different issue, but what I wanted to say is that what do you say, Jinnah was also a part of this, you can say, Congress only, right? So, but later what happened, that most of the Muslims started thinking that Congress is now inclining towards Hindu Mahasabha, and it is not at all a secular party. That was not true. We know that. So as relation between the Hindus and the Muslims was sent, each community organized religious procession with militant fervor, provoking Hindu-Muslim communal clashes and the riots in various cities. If every not deepened the distance between the two communities. What is this? Every right. Okay, every right. Okay, it looks like N. Okay, I'm actually reading from the PDF file. So deepened the distance between. So every time, whenever Hindu-Muslim clash took place, that further widened the gap between the Hindus and the Muslim, and this is how you can say that what Gandhi wanted to bring everybody under one umbrella, that was now next to possible. And it was a time, let's say you can say 1930-35, there was a man called Iqbal. Okay, he was the man who wrote Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara. Alright, okay, and now he talks about Pakistan. So when he says Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara, and the same man started talking about Pakistan, a separate country, okay, separate from India. what might be the situation or the circumstances that he started demanding Chaudhry Rahmat Ali and Allama Iqbal. These people started, they all were educated from England, right? Okay, so they all they were in England, they wrote the song सारे जहाँ से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारे हम बुलबुलें हैं इसकी ये गुलसिता हमारा, something like that. Okay, that means they were talking about the and pan India. Right now, what made them to think that the Muslims cannot live peacefully in one country and they will always be in minority? So they started demanding a separate country, that was Pakistan. Pakistan, the word was coined by, if I'm not mistaken, Chaudhry Rahmat Ali. Okay, and he was the one who talked about Pakistan, right? So you can see that these things, these Hindu-Muslim riots, where the Muslims are badly or brutally, you can say, beaten, thrashed, and murdered, butchered. So similarly, naturally, what will happen, that the Muslims will start thinking that if we are living in a country where 80% are the Hindus, right, we will never be safe and we will never get our political and, you can say, political and constitutional rights. So that is why they started thinking that we should separate. Okay, I'm at last page, last paragraph of page number 44. No, not now. The Congress and the Muslim League made efforts to negotiate an alliance, and in 1927 it appeared that such a unity could be forged, because Gandhi thought that without Muslim support, because Muslims were around 20%, right? So if 20% population does not participate, let's say, in the freedom struggle, of course there's no freedom struggle, and that will be meaningless, because they are the part of society. We have been living here for 500 to 700 centuries, right? 7 centuries, 5 to 7 centuries. So in that case, if we are living for many centuries together, and if this community or this section of the society does not participate in any kind of freedom movement, it is meaningless, right? So Gandhi always wanted, or the Congress wanted to have an alliance. The important differences were over the question of representation in future assembly. This is what I told you, that in future, suppose India gets independence tomorrow, right? What will be the future of the Muslims? Okay, so whether they will get adequate representation, or even they get adequate representation according to their population, they will always be 20%. So in a house of 100%, if we are always 20%, that means we are always in minority, right? So nobody, it will just like a far cry, nobody will listen to us. Okay, and whenever the voting time will take place, we are always in minority, so we will always be defeated by the majority. So in that case, it is always a question, it will always a matter of losing every time. So that's not good. So it says that future, what will be the representation system in future assemblies that were to be elected. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, one of the leaders of Muslim League, was willing to give up the demand for separate electorates if Muslims were assured reserved seats in the Central Assembly and representation in the proportion to population in Muslim dominated provinces like Bengal and Punjab. So he said that these are the Muslim dominated provinces, Punjab and Bengal. So there we need representation in the proportion of population. That means in these areas we have more population, so more members of Muslim community should be there in the house. Okay, Congress did not accept it, right? And even I tell you, though they demanded, and to some extent Congress accepted also this one, then also Congress leaders used to win from those areas, and that was you can say a kind of setback for the Muslim leagues, that even in the Muslim majority areas the Congress leaders are winning the elections, not the Muslim League leaders. So what is going on? That means people, even the Muslims also are not accepting Muslim League as a political party which represents the Muslim. Okay, that was the situation. So you may get it later. So it said if Muslims are assured that reserved seats in the Central Assembly, that means in Delhi Parliament, okay, let's say Parliament, in Parliament we are given assured reservation that 20% seats are reserved for Muslims. I understand that. And wherever the Muslims are dominating, let's say in Punjab and Bengal, right, there our representation in the house should be based on the population, proportion of population. You know the ratio and proportion, you have studied in maths. like that. Negotiation over the question of representation continue, but all hope of resolving the issue at all party conference in 1928 disappeared when M.R. Jaikar of the Hindu Mahasabha strongly opposed efforts at compromise. Hindu Mahasabha, one of the you can say Hindu organizations, strongly opposed that no, this will not work. Right. So when all party meeting was going on, the Hindu Mahasabha opposed this or rejected this idea, and after that the Muslims said that, see, if the Hindus are not listening and they are not accepting, what is the guarantee that we will be safe in India? Right. So we need a separate country, like that. Okay, because members were, see, this was happening in 1928. Now you can understand that, see, we did not know that when we are going to get independence, right? But independence was just 11 years far from 1928. 98? No, still it was around 20 years far. But then also this was going on. Okay, and in 1940s it becomes fierce. It became so fierce that that means a serious question. So when the CDM movement started, there was thus an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust between the communities. That means the Muslim thought that I don't know what will happen, and the Congress will work in what way. So they decided not to support the CDM. Alienated from the Congress, large section of Muslims could not respond to the call of united struggle. Many Muslim leaders and intellectuals expressed their concern about the status of Muslim as a minority within India. This is what I was talking about, that they will always be in minority. So we need a land, or you can say a holy land, Pakistan. What is the meaning of Pak? Pak means holy. Okay, so we need a holy land which will be based on the Muslim rules and all these things, right? So we need a separate country. So they feared that the culture and identity of minorities would be submerged under the domination of the Hindu majority, right? So this they had, but still I tell you, until 1920 or something, they had not started demanding a separate country. But of course they had started raising their fears that if this will go on, that Hindus will always in majority, what will happen to us, right? So this is what we say, that they will always be submerged under the domination of the Hindu majority. So we need to do something. Okay, here it says Muhammad Iqbal, I was talking about, Allama Iqbal. In 1930, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, the president of the Muslim League, he was the president of the Muslim League, reiterated the importance of separate electorate for the Muslim as an important safeguard for their minority political interests. See, 1930, he is not talking about Pakistan. Okay, he says that, he repeated this, that we need a separate electorate. His statement is supposed to have provided the intellectual justification for Pakistan demand that came up in subsequent years. So until 1930 there was no Pakistan. Okay, there was no word called Pakistan, right? Okay, but later it started emerging. I have no hesitation in declaring that if the principle that the Indian Muslim is entitled to full and free development on the lines of his own culture and tradition in his own Indian homeland is recognized as the basis of permanent communal settlement, he will be ready to stake his all of the freedom of India, his principle and blah blah something. Okay, a lot of things are written, you can read it later. Okay, I don't want to waste on time. What I want to say is that of course the suspicion has already suspicion was already there in the hearts and minds of the Muslims, right? And they were of course worried about their future and political and social economic future in India, that if we live together, what will happen to us, right? But of course until 1930 you can say there was no word for Pakistan. That was okay. All right. So that was, you can say, the political freedom and all these things. Now the topic deviates now here, and it says the sense of collective belonging. You have seen already in the nationalism in Europe also, that sense of collective belonging. So we saw that a lot many Majorca and many other folk arts and all dance, dialects and all these things were the collective identity. The Polish people and the Balkans, these people were collecting and they were trying to identify themselves or associate themselves with a particular kind of tradition and culture, right? Similar thing we have started doing here also. All right, so you can see this is the picture of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Notice how Tilak is surrounded by the symbols of unity. You can see what the symbols of unity here you have. So you can see here we have Taj Mahal in the right top corner. Okay, this side we have, I don't know what that is, but it's a temple here. All right, then you have church also. Okay, then I cannot see what the other one. Okay, and many other things are there. You can see the British government flag is there, and the Bharat Mata is this side, left hand side. Okay, spotless. What is that? Something is written, so you can figure out. Okay, so those things are there. So these are this picture was made as a symbolic thing. So that was also one of the you can say the symbol of collective identity. So here it says, nationalism spread when people began to believe that they are all part of the same nation, when they discover some unity that binds them together. But how did the nation become a reality in the minds of people? How did people belonging to different communities, regions, and language groups develop a sense of collective belonging? So we started inventing, or not inventing, I would say, discovering the collective identity. What are the ways we can associate ourselves with a common thing? So this sense of collective belonging began partly through the experience of united struggle, because see, since 1920, during NCM, then CDM, we had struggled together, we had fought together. Okay, and in that, this is how we got the experience of the lower caste, upper caste, Hindus, the Muslim. So we all have to think about the common identity. But there were also variety of cultural processes through which the nationalism captured people imagination, history and fiction. Just consider the nationalism in Europe type of thing. Folklore, songs, popular prints and symbols all played a part in the making of nationalism. I'm coming to the next page, that is page number 47. Now you can see the picture here. This is the picture of Bharat Mata, okay, the mother goddess, and that has four hands. As you can see what she has in all the four hands. In one she has the cloth, another one is the mala, you can say the beads, another one has the crops, in the I'm talking about, okay, and one has the books. Okay, so that means knowledge, prosperity, okay, spiritualism, all these things should be together. Okay, and this is how India will develop. So all right, so with this you can say all working class on the all section of society can associate. Farmers can associate with the crops. The religious mind people can associate with the beads. Okay, intellectual and the religious class people can associate with the books. Okay, and I don't know what this is. Maybe jute or something like that. Okay, I will check and I'll tell you. The identity of the nation, as you can see, is most often symbolized in a figure of image that we have seen in grade 9 also. Okay, at the French Revolution, then we saw in grade 10 also the nationalism in Europe, right? Same thing happened here also, and we cannot say that we borrowed from them and they borrowed from us. It's not like that. Okay, it is spontaneously, it evolved everywhere. So this helps create an image with which people can identify the nation. It was in the 20th century, with the growth of nationalism, that the identity of India came to be visually associated with the image of Bharat Mata. So the way you saw in Europe, Germania, and other female allegory, and the figures they created. Okay, similar thing we created also, but it was not that we copied from them. It's not at all. It's like that. Okay, so the image was first created by Bankim Chand Chattopadhyay, B.C. Chattopadhyay. Okay, Bankim Chand Chattopadhyay. In 1870, he wrote Vande Mataram. You remember Vande Mataram? Yeah, Vande Mataram. It was a book. Okay, that was in Anand Math. So Vande Mataram is the song, the national song, Vande Mataram, as a hymn to the motherland, and later it was included in his novel Anand Math, and widely sung during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. When? In 1905. Okay, so Vande Mataram, who wrote Vande Mataram? B.C. Chattopadhyay. Okay, who wrote Anand Math? B.C. Chattopadhyay. Vande Mataram became part of Anand Math. Okay, and that song was widely sung in Swadeshi movement in Bengal. That was in 1905, when partition of Bengal took place. I told you in the first class. Okay, so moved by the Swadeshi movement, Avanindranath Tagore painted his famous image of Bharat Mata. In this painting, Bharat Mata is portrayed as an aesthetic figure. She is calm, composed, divine, and spiritual. You can see the aura behind the picture. Okay, in subsequent year the image of Bharat Mata acquired many different forms as it circulated in popular prints and was painted by different artists in different way. Okay, so devotion to this mother figure came to be seen as the evidence of one's nationalism. So it was just, you can say, a replica of what we saw in Germania and other things in Europe. Okay, that one, and the Statue of Liberty, those kind of things. So ideas of nationalism were also developed through the movement to revive Indian folklore in late 19th century late 19th century India. Late 19th century India means 1890s, 1880s, 1890, when Congress was founded. Okay, in 1885, that time nationalists began recording folk tales sung by the bards, and they toured villages to gather folk songs or legends. These tales, they believed, gave a true picture of traditional culture that had corrupted and damaged by outside forces. Now you can easily understand that this was exactly the same what we studied in nationalism in Europe, right? Even in the grade 9 also, and in grade 10 also, right? So the same thing, but we cannot say that these nationalists knew what was happening in Europe. It's not at all. Okay, so two similar type of things sprouted in two different areas. When you can say that when we started doing this, see, it says in the late 19th century India, that means after 1875. By the time in 1850s, even 1875 plus, in England, in Europe, everything had already gone or done. Okay, 1789 was the year when French Revolution took place. 1848 was the year when another revolution in Europe took place. Right? Okay, all these things we had already done. Unification of Italy and Germany has already taken place by 1871 or something. So all those things had already taken place in Europe, right? But in India, it was still getting a shape. Right? That was going on. So it was essential to preserve this folk tradition in order to discover one's national identity and restore a sense of pride in one's past. In Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore, you know Rabindranath Tagore, right? One who wrote the national anthem, himself began collecting ballet, nursery rhymes, myths, and led to the movement for folk revival. In Madras, Natesa Sastri, remember this name, published a massive 4-volume collection of Tamil folk tales, the folklore of southern India. He believed that folklore was national literature, and it was mostly trustworthy manifestation of people's real thoughts and characteristics. So not only in North India, in South India also, the similar type of sentiment was going on, right? And this is how the Maharaja of Kerala, Travancore, Maharaja of Travancore, painted several Bharat Mata picture. Okay, that should also be here, but it is not here because that was in grade 9 chapter, which you have not studied in history. Okay, so anyway, so that was going on in in entire India. As the national movement developed, nationalist leaders became more and more aware of such icons and symbols in unifying and inspiring them in the feeling of nationalism. During the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, the tricolor flag. Earlier, we did not have what we have, the modern flag of India. We had the flag of Congress. But later, when we designed the flag of India, right, then we started using that one. So you can say in 1936 Olympic, when we see Tokyo Olympic is going on. Today was I think the last ceremony, right? The closing ceremony. Yeah, today. Oh, I did not see that because I was busy somewhere. Anyway, so are you happy with the Indian performance?
No.
No, okay, no problem. Did you go to Odaiva and all those areas where the Olympic symbols are there? The rings and all?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
Minato Mirai.
Yeah, I also went to a few days ago there, and I took some pictures and all, because when I came in 2014, I thought that I don't know whether I will be there during Olympic time or not, because 2020 was Olympic time, right? Anyway, I'm fortunate that I was in the city where Olympic took place, but anyway, we did not watch anything in the stadium and all. Anyway, the tickets were very expensive. Okay, and Corona, thanks to Corona, those things happened. But of course, what I want to say is that in 1936 Olympic, when Hitler was there in Germany, that time India did not have a flag. right? And India played the Olympic in the British flag, under British flag, because India was the colony of England that time. Okay, but one of the players quietly took out the hockey team. Are talking about the hockey team won gold medal there. Okay, because India is 8-time world Olympic champion in hockey. Right, today hockey condition is very bad in India, but anyway, so one of the players quietly took out the flag of Congress, and all the players held together, and they sang something, okay, for India. So that happened. The same year South Korea won a medal in Germany, and that time Japanese national song was sung over there. Why? Because South Korea was the colony of Japan that time. Okay, so these were the things. All right. So when I saw the picture, the flag, I thought that let me tell you the. So the tricolor flag was there, red, green, and yellow, and you can see here still we don't have that Ashok Chakra, right? That was designed. It had 8 lotus representation, 8 provinces of British India, and the crescent moon representing Hindu and Muslim. So this kind of design was there in the national flag of India that time. By 1921, we cannot say national flag, but Gandhi had designed the Swaraj flag. It was again a tricolor, red, green, and white, and has spinning wheel in the center, representing the Gandhian ideal of self-help. So this is what Gandhi designed the flag. Carrying the flag, holding it afloat during the marches became a symbol of defiance. Okay, so this is how we started having our own national flag, or you can say the song Vande Mataram and all these things. Okay, this is how we started showing our nationalism, and that filled us with the feeling of nationalism. Now further it says, next paragraph, another means of creating a feeling of nationalism was through the reinterpretation of history. Okay, by the end of the 19th century, and end of the 19th century means 1800 plus. Okay, 1890 or 1880 to 1890 to 1900. So by the end of 19th century, that means this is all the period of the foundation of Congress, because Congress was founded in what year? 1885, right? So you can say it was also the by the end of 19th century. Many Indians began feeling that to instill a sense of pride in the nation, Indian history had to be thought about differently. The British saw Indian as backward and primitive, incapable of governing themselves. In response, Indians began looking into the past to discover India's great achievement. So this is how we started discovering our history, right? And in 1920, we discovered what? We discovered Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Do you know about it? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
We started knowing about Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, right? Then we saw that, oh, this was the first, and when we got the carbon dating C14, we got to know that this was one of the ancient cities of the world. Around 5,000 years ago, we had a city, right? So this was the first boost of Yudhya one. Then we had a lot of scriptures on yoga, Ayurveda, and other Vedas and all these things. So that further gave a stimulus that no, today we are in bad shape. This does not mean that in the past also we had a bad shape. We had a civilization, we had a huge empire, and we had, you can say, so much of wealth, that is why these people came, right? So if we fight together, if we bring unity in the country, right, we can again regain our, you can say, our lost glory and all these things. Because I tell you, during the Akbar time, or you can say Mughal time, there were two richest countries in the world, India and China. Okay, and why all the Europeans came to India? Why? Because to plunder the wealth, right? Why the Muslims attacked so many times from Iran and Afghanistan, and that side the Persian Empire attacked so many times India? Why? Because of the wealth, right? So India was very rich, right? So when we got to know and we started discovering those things, we also filled with glory that okay, we have now bad time, but it will not last long. So they voted about they wrote about the glorious development in ancient time when art and architecture, science and mathematics, religion and culture, law and philosophy, craft and trade had flourished. We you can see in South India we have such a huge temples, right? And those temples are not new, built without any machinery or the modern machinery. How come it was possible? Right, so if we can make those big buildings, though we are living in cottages or you can say the huts and the mud house and all these things, but we had that kind of technology which made India proud in art and architecture. So that means, and art and architecture does not start, okay, until and unless the king or you can say the patronage are very, very strong, or rich. That means we had a rich political history here, we had a rich society, and the society was so rich that used to make such a huge lofty temples, right? So that means we had our glorious past, right? Now we have to regain that glory, right? So that also became one of the, you can say, the stimulus for the Indian nationalism. So this glorious time, in their view, was followed by a history of decline when India was colonized. These nationalist histories urge the readers to take pride in India's great achievement in the past and struggle to change the miserable condition of life under British rule. Because until you can say, even the Muslims, when we had Muslim rule from 1226, yeah, 1226 to, let's say, 1757, right? You can say around 500 plus years, 550 years roughly. India flourished a lot because they made India, of course, the richest countries in the world, right? So it was not that the Muslim plunders, those invaders who came, that's a different issue. Otherwise, the Muslims who lived in India, the Delhi Sultanate people or the Mughals, they made this country their homeland, right? That became their country. They did not come here to plunder the country and go somewhere else, right? So that this is how, and because of the strong rule and the vision, you can say, they made India a very, very, very rich and powerful country, right? That is why the whole world wanted to know where India is. Columbus also came to discover India only, but he eventually discovered some other continent. Okay, so these efforts to unify people were not without problems. When the past being glorified was Hindu, when the images celebrated were drawn from Hindu iconography, the people of other communities felt left out. So when we are talking about Hindu gods and goddesses and this and that, right? The Muslims, the Buddhists, the Jainis, they might feel alienated that, where is our past, what we did, right? So all these things. So when the leaders started glorifying Hindu gods and goddesses and glorious past, other communities left behind, okay, or they were ignored. So that was one thing. So now we are coming to finally to conclusion page, that is the last page. Okay, so a growing anger against the colonial government was thus bringing together various groups and classes of Indians into the common struggle for freedom in the first half of 20th century. That means you can see by 1950, no, 20th century, yeah. So by 1950, 1947 we got independence, right? Or you can say in that one, until 1947, our you can say accumulated grievances, the problems, all those things made us united, right? And we already had the feeling of nationalism, you can say, by the end of 19th century that started, right? We were able to fight the you can say the struggle for independence under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, right? And Gandhi, the main you can say the quality of Gandhi was that he changed the way of thinking, he changed the way of protesting, or you can say struggle. And he always argued that until unless you do the mass participation or the public does not involve themselves in this one, in any struggle, no struggle can be successful. And he already showed in 1916 and 17 when Champaran started, then Kheda started, then Ahmedabad mill workers. So in the three experiment, he showed the Congress leaders and people, thus mass participation is very, very important. Without them you can't win even a single battle. right? So that was the idea of Gandhi, and his simplicity and other things. Of course, he has a lot of controversy also. That's a different issue. But there we can see that on, one of he is my ideals, and my best book in my life is his biography, autobiography, My Experiment with Truth. Three times I have read, and even I get another chance to read, I will definitely read if I get a book, if I get the book, not a PDF file. Okay, that's such a nice book. So the Congress under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi tried to channel people's grievances into organized movements for independence, and through such movements, the nationalists tried to forge a national unity, right? But as we have seen, the diverse groups and classes participated in these movements with varied aspirations and expectation. That means here we are talking about the plantation workers, the farmers, the industrialists, the educated class, the tribals, all those people, right? So they had different aspirations, because every section of the society has its own problems, and maybe having different kind of solutions, right? So whenever a movement is started to eradicate their problems, to eliminate their problems, to solve their problems, right, they had different aspirations. So as their grievances were wide ranging, freedom from colonial rule also meant different things to different people. The Congress continuously attempted to resolve differences and ensure that the demand of one group did not alienate other. But Congress was in a very difficult situation many of the times, because when Congress supports the farmers, it goes against the landlords. When Congress supports the landlords, it goes against the farmers. So Congress wanted to gather the mass support. The Congress wanted to get everybody's support, but everybody was not equal, right? Your problems are conflicting with my problems, right? So in that case, we cannot be together, right? We cannot bring everybody on the same page. So in that case, Congress had to choose whether to take this, or take it or leave it. So in that case, Congress had sometimes a very, you can say, a very miserable condition, or you can say, Congress had to choose one of the two. So but anyway, you have to take a decision, and Congress took the decision whatever that time it was felt suitable for them. So this is precisely why the unity within the movement often broke down, because when you talk about the unity between the upper class and lower class, that also created many problems, because you saw that one of the leaders of Hindu Mahasabha opposed the you can say the unity between the Hindus and the Muslims. Similarly, Ambedkar wanted something, Gandhi wanted something. Okay, so all these things took place. This is precisely why the unity within the movement often broke down. The high points of Congress activity and the nationalist unity were followed by the phases of disunity and inner conflict between groups. And the most important part here, you will see that all these things were going according to the British plan, because the British always wanted to divide and rule, right? That means the society should be so fragmented that sometimes you give the lollipop to the British, to the Muslims, they will be happy. Sometimes they give the lollipop to the crying child like Congress, right? Congress will be happy. This is how they used to play with the Indian society and Indian politics, right? And further, when Ambedkar raised the point of separate electorate and all these things, they got another chance to divide the Hindus, from the upper caste and lower caste. So those things were going on. So it says, in other words, what was emerging as a nation with many voices wanting freedom from colonial rule. And here it says, Quit India movement. Okay, so that was also there. So here don't leave it. So the failure of the Cripps mission. Cripps mission came in 1942. Okay, and the effects of Second World War created widespread disappointment in India. This led Gandhi to launch a movement calling the complete withdrawal of British from India. So that is why he launched the movement, Quit India movement, 1942. Okay, the Congress Working Committee, in its meeting in Wardha in 14 July 1942, passed a historic Quit India resolution demanding the immediate transfer of power. See, what was the year? 1942. This does not mean that within a year Gandhi again got the success. Okay, it took another 5 years. Okay, 14 July to 15 August 1947. Right, so another 5 years it took. So on August 8, 1942, in Bombay, at that time it was called Bombay, The All India Congress Committee, AICC it is called, today also endorsed the resolution which called for the non-violent mass struggle on the widest possible scale throughout the country. So you have to understand what was happening in Quit India movement. So after the failure of Cripps mission and Second World War, because see why Second World War, I'm telling you. Okay, let me tell you a story. When I told you earlier also that when First World War was going on, the Britishers expected or appealed for help, right? And the Muslims and the Hindu helped them, right? Hoping that when the Britishers will win the war, naturally the Ottoman Empire will not be disintegrated and they will get some better things. Okay, and the Britishers promised a lot of things, but they did not give anything, right? They gave what? Rowlatt Act. So now Second World War was taking place, and again the Britishers wanted our help. So this time we had to learn a lesson from our past failure. If that time we had been very strong and tough, right, we could have got rid of these people during the First World War only, but we did not, right? But now we had to think that again the Britishers are in the same situation the way they were in the First World War. So now if this time again if we support them, that will be a disaster, right? Because now we have better weapons, we have fighter planes, we have atom bombs and all these things that we have. That time we did not know in 1942 that we have atom bombs, right? But anyway, that means better vessels, then warships and many other tanks and artillery and air force, everything we have. So in that case, definitely they will win, and if they win, again they will be further stronger and they will never leave India. So now this is the right time, okay, to hit the Britishers. So on August 1942 in Bombay, All India Congress Committee called for a resolution. That means the widest possible scale, and Gandhi delivered the famous "Do or Die" speech. So remember this word, the "Do or Die" speech he gave during Quit India movement. The call for Quit India almost brought the state machinery to a standstill in large parts of the country as people voluntarily threw themselves into the thick of the movement. Right? That means this is the high time, do or die. If you don't do, you will die. Okay, because the Britishers will never leave you, right? And while doing this, if you die, no problem, we have to sacrifice our life for the sake of the country. So that took place. People observed hartals, that means strikes, demonstrations, processions were accompanied by the national song and slogans. The movement was truly a mass movement which brought into its ambit thousands of ordinary people, namely students, workers, peasants. That means everybody participated. It also saw the active participation of leaders, namely Jayaprakash Narayan, Aruna Asaf Ali. Now you can see one is Hindu, another one is Muslim, Ram Manohar Lohia, and many women such as you can see what is this, Mantangani Hajra in Bengal, then Kanaklata Barua in Assam, and Rama Devi in Odisha. The British responded with much force, yet it took more than a year to suppress the movement because the Britishers had to fight domestically, even India also, and they were already engaged in the World War II, right? And they became so weak that they knew that they do not have enough machinery, enough strength or enough power to control India, and eventually after 5 years they transferred the power to the Indian people, and with the, you can say, the separation of the country, or you can say the division of the country between India and Pakistan. But eventually we got independence. That was okay. So this chapter is over now. You have some questions here. Did you do the MCQ I gave you in nationalism in India, and the other one, the geography one? Did you do that?
Geography I did.
Okay, geography you did. And this one, the MCQ on nationalism in India?
So we finished the chapter now, so I'll do it.
Okay, now you will do it. Yes, right. Okay, so now you can do. I can make more, and I will just keep uploading that one, right? And this chapter also is going to be on YouTube. So if you want to revise, you can do that. Not a problem. Okay. So I will send you the link. So some questions are given here. These questions are just too few. So many more questions will be coming. All right. And now in the next class, not next class, before that only, maybe within a day or two, I will send you the questions. All right, from the book, and that you can solve and you can do, because MCQs and fill in the blanks or short questions. All are same. Okay, short questions are very short questions are for 1 mark, right, or one word or something. So in that case, if any short question is very short question is given, right, and I give you two, three, or four options, so that becomes an MCQ. So if you do the questions I have given you, that one and more I will give you within a day or two, so that will make the chapter or you strong in this chapter. All right. Okay, similarly I will do in national exam in India also, and I'll send you. All right. Okay, so I leave you now.
Yes, sir.
I leave you now.
Yes, sir.